intentions. I know exactly what you're doing is perfectly for me, for my sake, always,
God bless you.
for your sake.
Oh,
You're looking at your notes.
that's why I suggest it's important that you, because otherwise, some people are looking at their phone, some people are looking in the book, and they're just going on their own, in their own head, in their own journey. But you should listen, everybody can do as they please, but the difficulty, of course, is that whatever that's being taught, you're not learning.
Especially watching your mouth. It's hard of hearing. I have to read lips, but now I'm hearing it.
L'chaim, l'chaim, everybody, l'chaim.
I don't know, bro.
The process of learning is a difficult thing. Why? The process of doing is easier because if you tell somebody, put down the cup, okay, that's an easy thing to do. Now, obviously, a person may have an ego that will prevent them from putting down the cup, right? But that's a more pronounced ego that, let's say your teacher said, put down the cup, right? You're in class and teacher says, put down the cup. Well, the student should listen, right? And that's an easier thing to have bittul, to have self-nullification, to put yourself aside, because it's a mere action, right? If a teacher told you, don't think of pink elephants, guess what? You're going to start thinking of pink elephants, and not to think of pink elephants is going to be a difficulty. Because the bittul of the mind, the self-nullification of the mind is much more difficult for two reasons. One is thought is constant, right? Action is, well, I did it one time, put down the cup, and finished. I might be thinking about, I want to pick up the cup, I want to pick it up. But in the act of putting it down, it's a one-time bittul, right? But the bittul, the self-effacement, and your thoughts has to be constant, because I'm constantly have this idea in my mind, in my head. I had this yesterday. I had a problem yesterday in davening. I had this amazing idea in davening. I had an amazing idea, but there was a problem. It was in the middle of davening, and I had to push it away, and it would come back. I'd have to push it away, right? Because in your thoughts, they're constant, right? Not like your actions, and therefore the bittul there in your thoughts is much harder, right? It was hard. Didn't succeed so greatly.
But you're aware of it.
Yeah.
I'm finding I'm aware.
And that's in thought. Perspective is even harder. Because perspective isn't your thoughts. Perspective is the way you see things. Oh, put that aside. So, for example, the Talmud tells us Reb Zera, one of the great sages, he went from the study of the Jerusalem Talmud to the Babylonian Talmud to write. And they're a very different way to learn, very different methodology, very different. And so he fasted 40 times in order to not to forget the methodology of the old way, so he could learn a new methodology. And it's not an easy thing. Because, when it comes to methodology, if you've been used to something for years, to change that methodology is not what you think. It's the way your brain is wired and the way you perceive things, right? To change that is really, really hard. So he fasted to just break, that perspective. That's a real hard thing. So when we're learning, for example, Tanya together, and to be able to break through a methodology or a perspective of how we perceive things, you got to not only put your thoughts aside, but you even to put your perspective, and that's a hard, how do you put perspective aside? I mean, because in everything you view, it's with your perspective, right? So we got to be aware, at least, that I'm seeing things with my perspective, and maybe, My perspective may not be the end all and be all. It's just my perspective, and maybe there's more perspective to see. And if we are at least aware of that, then when we're learning, the process of learning, we'll be able to entertain a new perspective, a new idea. And that takes effort because and especially it's in the nuance of something, because it could be a slight, a slight distinction. But that distinction is going to take a real capability of being able to appreciate it and understand it, and not just see it as part and parcel of everything I saw before. Right?
In a moment.
Yeah. Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zurich and Kadeshim, where it's a privilege and pleasure to share with you Tanya and to have a fabringen. L'chaim. This is transparent, that this is the real thing. Vodka, no, it's water. Oh, l'chaim. Life is one big fabringen. Yeah. Okay, we're complete today, conclude today, chapter 35. Chapter 35 gives us new perspective on the life of the Beinoni. What's the purpose of the Beinoni? The Beinoni cannot be completely transformative, cannot change his perspective.
Set up again.
He can't really change his perspective. He can't truly change his perspective. He can't truly change his feelings in his heart. Right? In other words, not a righteous person. A righteous person can transform the negativity of one's heart, right? And no longer have any desire for materiality. That materiality is just a means of connection to God. That's all it is, right? We can't do that. We don't have the capacity for that. That we won't be enticed by food that looks, appetizing. We may not give in to it. Maybe I won't eat it because it's not healthy, but that doesn't mean I won't be enticed, right? The righteous person is not enticed. Literally not enticed. The Beinoni is enticed, but just never gives into that, right?
So he chooses not to give it.
He chooses not to give in, right? So that's the Beinoni. In other words, what's the Beinoni? The evil nature of the animal soul is still there, right? It never goes away, even when we're learning Tanya, or when you're giving charity, or when you're putting on your tefillin and praying to God. The evil nature of the animal soul is still there. It has not been absorbed into holiness. It's character quality, right? Yet, what's happening when you do the mitzvah? Right now, like we're learning, you've subjugated to holiness. It's sort of like saying amen against its will, the animal soul, right now in learning Tanya.
Just like, it's being suppressed.
It's being suppressed. It's being subjugated. Might be a better word.
But then,
right? It's agreeing. It's agreeing. How's it agreeing? Because in the end, the action of giving charity, you need your animal soul to give the vitality to do it, right? You need the animal soul didn't go away, right? It's giving vitality to you to actually do the act of putting on the tefillin, because your godly soul is inspiring you, but it's not. It's too removed from a coarse body to give the vitality for you to put on the tefillin. The animal soul is giving you, right, vitality to the body, to the body. So it's engaged in the mitzvah, but in what way? In a way that it's okay. All right, I give in. I answer amen. All right, like as they say uncle. Say uncle. When you say uncle, what does it mean? You give up. You really want to, you have no choice. You're giving up, right? You have no choice. So the animal soul here has no choice.
Given the, I say right circumstances,
Hmm?
but given different circumstances, that which is subjugated can overtake the individual.
Can come back. Yeah, it can come back and with it. Yeah, yeah, of course. We're talking about now the Beinoni and us, Beinoni in training. That's what we're talking about right now, right? That when we're doing a mitzvah, we're putting on our tefillin, right? Let's do the action-oriented mitzvah, because that's where the body is engaged, right? When you're learning Torah, it's more soulful, right? It's more the mind. It's more your thinking, right? And speech, but it's not an action involved. So let's say you're putting on your tefillin or giving charity. So again, it's agreeing because it's engaged, right? Why? Because the force of the mind of the individual is powerful enough that it subjugates the animal soul. And this animal soul, okay, uncle, okay, right. So does that sound very pretty for the animal soul? Not really. Why? Because the nature of the animal soul, its self-centeredness, it's the lust of the animal soul that it has for whatever it lusts, right? It's there, but it's just dormant in the moment, right? Its nature is dormant in the moment that you're doing that mitzvah, right? Now, this is what's important. Remember, we spoke about the Shekhinah, the divine presence, the light, right? That you have through the mitzvahs that you do, the good deeds, that's the fuel that goes through the wick, which is the metaphor for the body, and then it creates a light of God through the act of the mitzvah. So you might think, well, the light of God, for the righteous who are through and through engaged totally in the mitzvah, the Beinoni isn't, because the animal soul is its character, its negative character quality is just dormant. It's not fully engaged. Doesn't matter. In that moment of doing the mitzvah, the light of God is encompassing the individual. Even though you didn't transform the negative character quality of the animal soul, which is very powerful. The animal soul is in a perfect unity, right, with the individual doing this light, the divine light. So the animal soul and the body are absorbed in the light of God, right? A ray of light absorbs upon the totality of the animal soul and the body, encompassing the individual in the act of doing the mitzvah. It's powerful. And this is the idea where our sages say that assembly of 10, divine presence rests, meaning it doesn't permeate them, it encompasses them, right? It's encompassing them. Got that?
Mhm.
Now, so this this light of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence, which is the Ein Sof being revealed, right, is everywhere. It's everywhere. The only thing is it's concealed from us, right? Right? We're not experiencing that, but it's what's happening in the act of dawning tefillin, of lighting Shabbos candles, of giving tzedakah. It's encompassing us. We just don't feel it. Now, the fact that the Shekhinah encompasses me when I do that act, encompasses you and everyone. So how many Shekhinahs are there?
It's just one.
Yeah, but, oh, sorry, what happened here? Okay, good. There's one Shekhinah, but, it's everywhere. How so? How do you understand that? It's true what you're saying. How do you understand it? Right, it's Chabad.
It seems like the sun. I mean, there's one sun, but the rays of the sunlight is all around us.
Ah, very good. There's one sun. This is the metaphor. Beautiful. Exactly. There is one sun, but the rays of the sun come into this building in one manner, into another building in another manner, a third building, and right? So it's one Shekhinah that will encompass every individual in the act of their mitzvah in a different way, right? In other words, the more engaged, the more it'll be encompassing, what it'll encompass, right? And so on and so forth. But it will encompass, as the sun, its rays are found everywhere in a different way. So the Shekhinah will be found also encompassing us in the acts of mitzvahs that we do wherever we are. And that concludes chapter 35. Very powerful. Chapter 35, in one word, the title, Lasaisi, to do. So here we have from the action of doing mitzvahs, what it means to have the light of God encompassing us. That was what we wanted to come away with this chapter. And that's something unique. This is something unique about the Beinani's purpose, as we're going to get more into it in the next chapter, is about bringing godliness into the physical reality of this world, right?
Mhm.
First is in the physical reality of us. In other words, the purpose of the Beinani is not self-transformation. Incomplete self, I shouldn't say that. Of course, you got to transform yourself, right? Your thought, speech, and action. That's transformational, right?
Mhm.
That's transformational, right? Because in the act of doing the mitzvah, what happened to the animal soul? It's dormant. It's not having its effect. That itself is transformational. Is it complete? No. But the job of the Beinani is not complete self-transformation. That's the job of the tzaddik, right? The job of the Beinani is just the transformation in as much of thought, speech, and action. And as we will see in the next chapter, what that means for the world. That's what the Beinani has particularly, right? The mission statement,
Mhm.
right? Right now was understanding in the person themselves, right? Because we had a question at the beginning of chapter 35. You remember what the question was? What's the purpose of the Beinani? It's hard to understand because if it would be always to defeat the animal's soul, then it would be metaphorically, it would be you have a godly soul, you have an animal soul, and it's like a wrestling match, two sides of the ring, two different opponents of each other, right? And the whole purpose is that the guy in white should always beat the guy in black, right? The good guy against the bad guy, right? I think that's why they make they make all the fake wrestling matches, right? They have the good guy against the bad guy, right? Uh, so and that would be, so then that's your purpose. Always defeat the bad guy inside of you. The nefesh habam is your animal soul. Always defeat it. That's your purpose. The Alter Rebbe says that's not true though. That cannot be your purpose. Why not? Remember? Because that's not a good metaphor to understand your makeup. You have an animal soul and a godly soul that are intertwined with each other. And therefore, it cannot be just to defeat it, because then that would not be a good, then you really have to be two different, that's like, the godhood and the Satanhood, like they have in other faiths, right? The duality of life, duality of your personality, right? And then ultimately that is idolatry. So even in your own personhood, you have them intertwined with each other. So it can't be just to defeat it, right? It's got to be that you've got to transform it. Well, the tzaddik transforms his animal soul, but the Beinoni doesn't. But here we just learned that the Beinoni does transform, not completely, but does transform in the moment of doing the act of the mitzvah. So much so, it transformed the person in your thought, speech, and action. But here, particularly in action, right? What's most important is in action. Why in action? Because the transformation is taking, what's the transformation here? What's the transformation?
So to become saints that are holy and
Just give me give me one word.
Turning light into dark, turning dark into light, no?
You have the light of God, that's encompassing you, right? The Shekhinah. In the act itself, you have the Shekhinah that is encompassing what? Your godly soul? Yeah, obviously your godly soul, right? But just that?
is encompassing you, which also includes animal soul
and
the godly soul.
And body.
And right, yeah,
That's the point. The point is encompassing your body in the moment that you do the mitzvah. That's the whole point. In other words, there is something transformative. In that moment, your animal soul, its nature, right, of being self-absorbed is dormant, right? It's dormant. And therefore allowing it to be kind of say uncle, and allowing to give vitality to you to do the act of putting on your tefillin, the act of giving charity, right? In the moment. And therefore allowing you to be absorbed in the light of God at that moment, the Shekhinah. That's transformative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it total? No. But is it of that aspect of you? Yes. That is purposeful,
Mm-hmm.
right? It will now bring to even a greater purpose, right? That's only about you, what we learned in chapter 35. Next chapter is going to bring it that that's actually why God created the world, as we're going to go and bring it further. In other words, he didn't just bring it for your self-transformation, right? That would not be sufficient. That would not, he doesn't need that, so to speak, even though it sounds amazing, right? But it's even greater than that. It's something that is of God's need of the nature of this world that we engage in. But we'll see when we get into that. But this is like, whoa. This is,
The ultimate purpose.
The ultimate purpose, exactly. The ultimate purpose.
But it's still the animal soul that animates the individual to do the mitzvah.
Yeah.
So
Therefore,
why is there the need to suppress
If you want to the mitzvah, if you don't suppress it.
Yeah, and also.
If you live solely by your animal soul, when would you do a mitzvah? When would you do a mitzvah?
It's not only, it's not that, but as opposed to the godly soul, the animal soul is used by the individual to animate to do the mitzvah.
Mhm.
Right.
So it's-
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's what we said. That's why it's absorbed in the light of God, because it's saying uncle, right? It's saying, okay, I'm in it. Is the animal soul totally in it? No, because its natural instinct, its natural character quality is just dormant at that moment.
Mhm.
Mm,
But it's alive and well.
right, 'cause it
What's the
comes-
proof? Because after the mitzvah, you could pick out. You could pick out after the mitzvah. How could you do that? Because the animal soul was only dormant in the moment you did the mitzvah. So he got absorbed. Afterwards, you pigged out. How's that? Because you're not a tzaddik. It was only dormant. It came back. Its aggressive nature, and you ate too much sushi.
But what about being mindful in the moment? So it's one way.
I say that because I've done it. I'm speaking. When I speak personal. By the
So
way,
that's purpose, the animal soul.
I mean, and this of course has to be constantly looked at, but being mindful of each moment so that
Mhm.
in the moment, I'm saying subjugate the animal soul. If to do that which is, which is godly, and in order to avoid picking out, I again focus on the moment. What am I doing in this moment? So that the animal soul will not be subjugated. So in other words, the animal soul will be subjugated.
right?
And then when the next moment happens, I constantly
Exactly.
moment
Yeah.
by
Exactly.
moment,
Yeah. By
most it's practice.
a lot of practice.
Mhm.
So to avoid picking out, in other words, I can make that choice. What am I going to do at this moment? Pick out or subjugate my animal soul?
Mhm.
Right.
I choose to subjugate my animal soul by doing mitzvah, doing Torah.
Every
Right.
moment.
The
is a
next
choice.
moment comes,
Mhm.
and so on and so on and so on.
Right.
Every moment is a choice.
Right. But exactly. Every moment's a choice, or at least potentially we have the choice.
Mhm.
But the important point over here is in the physical act of doing a mitzvah, my body is absorbed in the light of God. That moment, connected. You are connected to Hashem in the act of the mitzvah, not in the intent of the mitzvah.
Correct.
It's not that your mind, you were like, you meditated and you thought about this, and therefore this not, and that's also a huge chiddush, a huge novel idea, right? This is completely counterintuitive. This is counter everything of Western and Eastern thought. Eastern thought, if you stop a Tibetan mountain and you gaze your navel, oh, you're connected, right? Because you're meditative, right? In Western thought, everything is about,
Bigger, better.
no, everything is about your intention, right? Your intention, right? That your intentions are what's important. This is not about intention at all. Actually, this is without, I mean, obviously you have a greater intention when you're aware of this, right? But it's in the act itself is the connection. And the act itself is a connection, not just of the divine soul, but of the body and the animal soul at the same time, right? That is such a novel idea that doesn't exist. So asher lachein, which means as follows, that to put on tefillin with a Jew, right? And they're on the way to McDonald's to eat not kosher. So most religious Jews would say, what's the value? Because obviously there's not a real intent here of being connected to God because, hey, he said he's going to McDonald's. He's like, strong about doing it. And even afterwards, he continues to be strong about doing that, right? So what's the value in the moment that you put on tefillin? So what's the value? In that moment, the person was totally bound up with the light of God, the Shekhinah that was, right? Because in that moment, the animal soul was dormant in its desire to be self-directed and did God's thing. He did a mitzvah in that moment, right? What's the value? The value is in and of itself. The end in itself is its ultimate value. Now, at the same time, obviously, it's wonderful to have, mitzvah geras mitzvah. The mitzvah brings another mitzvah, and that it brings more good, and it does ultimately. Because of the inherent value, that's why it could bring also consequential value. But the teachings here is not about consequential value. It's about the connection in and of itself, right? That which we don't experience it as we said earlier, but it doesn't take away from the fact of what's happening in that moment, right? We experience consequential stuff, right? Right? Like, you get a sliver, big deal. But what's the big deal afterwards when you have to take out, you have to go and dig deep inside to get it out? That hurts. That's consequence, right? So we live a life of consequence, and the Alter Rebbe it lives a life of what is. What it is. What is it? In the act is a divine connection. You're not just a divine connection. The Shekhinah, you're one and united, mamish with Ein Sof with Hashem. Right? Now, well, we're going to learn more about this. That's unbelievable. So just to put on film with another Jew, right, and they are, not dedicating themselves, to mitzvahs, and they might even be doing you a favor and doing it for you because, it's still a connection.
You're such a good salesman.
Huh?
You're such a good salesman.
No, the Alter Rebbe is such a good salesman.
You're doing it for you, you're such
Oh.
a good salesman.
Yeah. Yeah. That is it's like there's such a chiddush. And what's important over here is like the Alter Rebbe is giving us Chabad, so meaning an understanding of it. It's not just stating a nice feel-good idea, right? And he's giving us a very profound understanding of how that happens.
In 3D.
Which was a Shekhinah of the light before the sun was created. Sun was only a metaphor. Shekhinah, God's presence was before creation. I mean, it was, in creation. So it's just a metaphor of the sun. Why does God need anything from us? Good question, Lisa. Lisa, can you come back tomorrow and we'll talk about it, okay? We're going to talk about it in tomorrow's class. Exactly what it is that God wants, desires, and, well, yeah. Okay, Rabbi Ronnie Fine coming to you for Chabad Zichin Kadeshim, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you. Tanya, Rambam is coming up. The end of the laws of Tshuva and the end of the first book, Sefer Mada.